CM board meeting representing the City of London and doing important work there. So he gave a very advanced notice that he was not going to be here. Councillor Reinholz just went on leave very recently, and Councillor Turner is on his way. So once he gets here, we'll be able to start the meeting. Well, thank you very much for making your way over here so quickly, Councillor Turner. I know you had a meeting right up against this one. So I'd like to call the meeting to order and see if there are any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Okay, I don't see any. I would like to read the statement. The City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for council standing or advisory committee meetings and information upon request. To make a request for any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or 519-661-2489, extension 2425. Of course, you can call 311 to get the city. Colleagues, that brings us to our actual agenda. Perhaps we can have just an update on the very first report, and then we can get into any questions. Go ahead.
So in terms of the consultant selection, engagement, and construction procurement review, this review had taken place over the past 4 months in terms of Deloitte meeting with management and management's team to execute the scope. What we focused on was the operational processes and controls. We looked at the selection and engagement of consultants, how the management of contracts was undertaken, as well as the performance of work for tendering, change orders, and the contract administration and compliance activities that the city undertakes. So what's important to note for this particular review is that each service area within the city manages its own consultant and construction procurement and project management. Therefore, internal audit focused primarily on the environmental and engineering services department because that division had the higher percentage of capital spend, and it made the most sense from an internal audit perspective to focus our time within that particular area. From a key management strength and process perspective, we can indicate that there are standard documents that are being used, that there is consistent public communication in terms of the strategy as well as awareness, and the change order process meets the various requirements that we had looked at, as well as the compliance activities as well. So within this particular review, there is 8 medium priority observations. We had 1 low and 1 leading practice. If you like, I can take you through all 8 of the medium priority, or if you like, we can just open it up to questions and answer anything that you had.
Colleagues, how would you like to proceed? Do you want an overview of the medium priority observations or just get into questions? Okay, go ahead.
All right, through the chair, not a question about any of the specific observations, but more of one understanding this is focused in one service area. And it seemed that some of the recommendations could also apply in other areas. And I'm wondering, is there any opportunity to share the recommendations or scale them so that other service areas could leverage the work and the recommendations that Deloitte has made?
Through the chair to the committee, very much so. A lot of the recommendations here can be and will be shared with other operations within the city. Take, for example, the medium observation with respect to compliance to the soon-to-be enacted Prompt Payment Act taking place on October 1st, 2019. We are working with the working group comprised of multiple service areas for that compliance, so it's not just focused on construction and admin.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. And my apologies to all who are here. I try to be prompt and punctual, but as the chair had mentioned, I had a meeting that backed right onto this and had to navigate a few blocks from there to here. So thank you, and my apologies again. Thank you for this report. I found it quite interesting as I read through it. And I think the findings were well-founded. The identification of the issues, the management response plans, so those were all seem to be quite appropriate. My questions, I guess, specifically, I'd start off with just 1.01, which is contract lifecycle reviews. This totally makes sense that this would be something that we would do. That is something that in the management of contracts we would take a look back, say how well did those contracts get executed, what were the issues, what were the barriers. But what would the impact be associated with those lookbacks? I could see kind of three potential paths. One could be penalties to the contractor, another could be bonuses to the contractor, and a third could be an impact on future bidding opportunities. Or is this just a general QA without necessarily implications into the contract management?
So that observation is meant to meet those three criteria that you had identified. Then it becomes management's determination if they wanted to continue with that particular provider or go back and have further conversations if something didn't meet the compliance requirements within the contract.
So through you, Mr. Chair, I guess perhaps this is a question for staff then. Do we have provisions within our contracts and our tenders that have either scoring criteria on the RFP or the tenders that would be impacted by a previous look back? In order to have those, I'd imagine we do have penalty clauses in there as well, and those have been things that have surfaced in the past for us that do catch our interest. So I guess just a bit of an overview of how that works and what potential impact staff would see this as having and what structures we have in place in order to have those impacts associated with the review.
Through the chair to the committee. Yes, we do have liquidated damages. We do have different penalty clauses depending on the type of procurement, in this case, construction that we're speaking to. It'll vary, again, whether it's linear or vertical construction, as to whether it would be CCDC, for example, for the vertical construction or OPSS for linear. But we also have a provision of the procurement of goods and services policy to monitor the performance of our suppliers. It's section 20.5. So it's not just a reactive or a review at the end of the process, but it's an ongoing conversation, two-way dialogue, and a discussion about the overall performance of how the contract is being delivered to the city and meeting our expectations. So I think this is something further that will help enhance this process, and it certainly gives us more vital data and information for making those forward business decisions as to who we're going to be working with from a construction perspective.
Thank you, that's helpful. So, so failure to meet the standards within a contract in a material way could impact future awardings of contracts, and this process would give us some legal standing in which to tie that to the awarding of future contracts. Okay, that's helpful. The second question I had, just give me 1 second here. With respect to CCP 5.0, which is the Approval of Construction Consultant Award, the identified issue here was a question of timing to be able to execute quickly enough on contracts and awarding of contracts. Two issues were identified here. One was council's workload cycle, in order to be able to get it on the agenda. And the second was a question of the appropriate approval thresholds and dollar figure. This kind of identifies those as the issues, but doesn't make a recommendation as to whether, one, if those thresholds are appropriate. Like contract awards of greater than $3 million and consulting services greater than 100,000 seem like appropriate financial controls that would require council oversight and approval. But there seems to be an allusion in here to perhaps considering higher thresholds so that they didn't require a contract approval, that there was actually an approval authority delegated from council. I guess the question is, are those appropriate? Are we looking at and considering higher thresholds? And then how does that reconcile, I guess, procedurally for us to consider at a council level to make sure that we help efficiently and effectively get these contracts awarded in a timely manner?
Based on the benchmarking that we had done with other local governments, the thresholds do seem appropriate. It's more focused on the timing around the awarding of contracts and making sure that this making sure that efficiencies can move forward and there isn't delays based on when council is meeting.
So that said, through you to staff, what do we need to be considering on the scheduling of these? I mean, we can always add more meetings, but that's never in anybody's interest. So is there a procedural way that we can help accelerate those?
Through the chair to the committee, we reviewed the data that was provided from the audit, and from the samples that were given to us, we didn't see a direct correlation to this recommendation, although we certainly are willing to review it as an action item, and we'll report back to this committee our findings once we've completed those. We do take our thresholds very seriously. We do benchmark them with other municipalities across Canada, and there are certain trade agreements that we also have to be very cognizant of as well. And so there's a lot of thought that's gone into the thresholds that we have. And as mentioned by Deloitte, our thresholds were reviewed in the previous procurement audit, and they were found to be satisfactory at that time. And so again, we'll review the findings of this particular audit, but I did want to make it clear that the data set that we received did not align with the recommendation entirely.
And just in follow-up in the observation, it states that the average time between the RFP closing date and the committee date of 50 days, which does not align with leading practice. What is the timeline that is leading practice?
So what we had seen in some other local governments, the leading practice would be somewhere between like 25 to 40 days. So we just saw that this timeline was slightly higher, not necessarily to say that it needed to be changed, but it's something to keep in mind from an approval and timeliness perspective of when certain contracts are being awarded.
And through that, we haven't identified any increased risk either to costing or to contract defaults or anything like that. It's just more of an observation on timelines as compared to peers.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions, colleagues? No, okay. On the same observation, I thank my colleagues for the questions already. I don't know if this is good or not, but I've had the opportunity to be the acting mayor a couple of times, and when I do that, I have to sign things. So I now have the benefit of seeing at the end of the process the giant stack of documents and the path through all the different levels of approval. So related to this last one where we're talking about a slight delay potentially in the front end of authorizing the work, I'm also wondering if you found anything on the back end actually getting the documents authorized after they've been approved by council. Because, I mean, I just looked at one just recently that there was quite a bit of time between when it had been approved and when I was actually dealing with it, and even between the approval and what the initial construction start date was supposed to be. So, you know, that's a very small sample. I don't want to overreact to something, but it did seem to me like, you know, things could wait with lawyers and with the consultants who need to go get their paperwork filled out. Like, there's all kinds of things that could delay things at the end, and I just wanted to ask about that to see if we're seeing anything in this audit that we should be aware of, anything we could be improving on the back end after it's been approved, but before it's been executed.
Based on the samples that we had looked at, we didn't see any back end issues. These samples more or less related to the timeliness of getting the front end approved. It was just more of a waiting game in terms of having the approvals take place and then being able to move forward.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to just ask about that. Any other questions or comments on those? If not, perhaps we can have a motion. Go ahead.
Just one general question as well around the structuring of procurement taking place within disparate service areas. Would that be comparable to other municipalities as well? Is that just the way the procurement function works in a decentralized way?
Yes, that would be the case in terms of what we'd see.
Okay, do we have a motion to receive that report? Councilor Turner, seconded by Ms. Higgs. All those in favor? Approved. So these ones are all related to the summary the dashboard, so perhaps you can deal with them all at once. I don't know if that's appropriate, but go ahead.
So in terms of the 2019 internal audit plan, we are underway. We are moving forward with parking enforcement assessment. That review is currently in the observation stages, as well as moving into reporting with management. The other reviews to be able to identify is the IT cyber risk workshop. That will be 100% complete by the end of today. The workshops are taking place. Well, they did take place this morning, and there'll be another one this afternoon. In terms of the IT security assessment, that review is underway, and that will be set to be completed for the next audit committee meeting as well. And the class replacement project, the reason why you would see a delay there is that it's just an ongoing project, and there's been a change in the go-live date. So Deloitte is just continuously monitoring and working with management to be updated within that review. The other activities that are taking place is we're starting our discussions with the senior leadership team for the internal audit plan refresh to be able to look at what projects will be undertaken within 2020 as well. The other items to look at are in regards to the audit observation summary of high and medium priorities. So since our last meeting, management has been able to close 5 medium priority observations, those being in relation to 2 in the ITS portfolio management and project management assessment. We had an observation close within building permit, 1 within the procurement process assessment, and another within the class replacement project that we had undertaken. In terms of past due observations, so we do have 4 medium priority observations that have come past due. 3 of those are in relation to, 2 of those are in relation to the building process assessment, and 1 in regards to the management compensation. Management does have action plans in place in terms of working with ITS in terms of being able to upgrade the portal. So we do see significant process within that area. And the other item around management compensation, that's just in regards to a vacant employee position that they haven't been able to fill. But otherwise, the management is undertaking their steps necessary to be moving forward on their management implementation plans.
Questions about the summary and the dashboard?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just really through you to our consultants. I just want to make a comment on the observation summary. I find this incredibly helpful. At the outset, when we did the services procurement discussions about what we were looking for, this is exactly the kind of thing that I hope to see. And I really appreciate that when this comes forward, having a sense of where those recommendations are, where they go, and that they are being completed and executed. So, so thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other questions, so perhaps I have a motion to receive those reports. Councillor Turner, Ms. Higgs, all those in favor? Okay, that's approved. I don't see any deferred matters, additional business. Is there any from the committee? No? Can I have a motion to adjourn? Councillor Turner, Ms. Higgs, all those in favor? That's 1 too much. Approved, okay. Thank you very much, everyone.